Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 439, Return to Dark Tower.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Go check out Game Toppers at their website, gametoppersllc.com. Look at all of the awesome equipment they have, the tables, the legs, the dining leaves, all the accessories for the tables, like the cup holders, the dice towers, the mats. We can never talk enough about how awesome the mats are. Great quality with the stitched edge, and the art on them is beautiful. Go to gametoppersllc.com. You will not be disappointed.
Here's the deal, dear listener. We all know that the interwebs can be a dangerous and treacherous place. But there is a fantastic little oasis for you out there called meeplenation.com. It's a fantastic website. We upload blogs every week, little articles about all kinds of things game related. There's photos on there, links to past episodes, and of course, bios if you'd like to find out a little bit more about the people sitting around the table.
And our bloggers, too. We would also love to hear from you, so please email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. We also have Patreon. We love to play games, and we love to sit around and talk about games. We love to podcast. Patreon is a fantastic way for you to show your support and to allow us to continue doing something that we love. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find a link to Patreon at meeplenation.com. We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I am Douglas Stewart. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
And I am Andy Holliday.
Did something wrong. The holidays were sitting next to each other. Supposed to break that up. Since Logan's not here to break up the Howards.
That's true.
Stuart really adds a lot of diversity to
It
the
does.
cast, doesn't it?
It does.
Not only is your last name not an H, it's of no relation either.
Nathan, you just blew my mind.
It didn't take much.
I did not realize that we all started with an H before Doug showed up.
Oh, really?
Never even considered it.
This week we are discussing Return to Dark Tower. For an age, the tower lay in ruins. Unbeknownst to the people of the realm, a great evil stirred in its bowels. It started with strange sightings. A flock of crows flying in circles until they dropped from the sky. The lake frozen solid in the height of summer. In time, they could not deny that which they most feared. The evil had not been vanquished. The darkness would soon fall again. The tower will rise. So this is a sequel to the 1981 Grail game. Return to Dark Tower is a game for 1 to 4 players who take on the role of heroes. Together they gather their resources, cleanse buildings, defeat monsters, and undertake quests to build their strength and discern what foe ultimately awaits them. And when the heroes face the tower, the game shifts into its dramatic second act, where their players have one chance to defeat the enemy once and for all. I have thoroughly enjoyed this game. I have played it maybe 6 times now, 6 or 7 times. It's been awesome. I have loved it.
A while ago, Brent was really good at going to the thrift stores and finding bits and pieces. At one time, he had 3 copies of the original Dark Tower. And this is something that I never played. I was brand new to the game. He had pieces of it sitting in the old Meeple Nation HQ for a long time as he was waiting and putting pieces together. James Clark, who is part of the podcast as well, he loved this game as a kid. He had actually gone through and resoldered and repaired one of the towers for Brent so that he could turn around and resell it. It is, for a lot of people, one of those grail games. As kids, people really, really enjoyed. The designers of this are Isaac Childres, Noah Cohen, Rob Daviau, Justin Jacobson, and Brian Neff. This is a collaboration of some great designers who have come together to try to create something that will match those memories that people had when they were younger. BGG rates the original Dark Tower game at a 6.9. For those of you out there that put a lot of weight in what BGG rates a game, it's above average, but not by much. The new version has an 8.5 rating. I've only played the game the one time, but I feel that it deserves that 8.5 rating. My one and only experience, well, I guess it's not my one and only. I started playing the game. James showed up, and as I mentioned, this was a game that he loved as a kid. I forfeited my seat so that he could have the opportunity to play it, which he was super excited to do. He was really excited to play it again at SaltCon that we had recently. This game has had a lot of hype, and I think it's a game that deserves a lot of that hype. Very much looking forward to playing it again. to experience a little bit further. The game we played felt like it was a little bit of a breeze through. From my overhearing of your table talk, that was kind of an uncommon thing to run away with it like that. I always like a cooperative game to have a high level of challenge, and I still felt there was the challenge there. Really pleased with the experience of the game that I played. But yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it again and maybe playing a different hero and experiencing some more of that challenge.
That's what's so great and so well done about the design of this game. To begin with, when you open up the application, you get to pick which foes you're going to face, and you can see those foes and what qualities or attributes that they're going to be vulnerable to. So if you want a more challenging game, you can pick those qualities that maybe you lack or have fewer of among the party members, and that in and of itself is going to make it a little more challenging. You're going to have fewer advantages against those foes as you fight them and face them. You have to try to gain those advantages during the game rather than starting out with them. There's also a way to increase the difficulty level just within the app. You start out at just the regular difficulty, which I think is fairly difficult depending on which of the bosses that you're fighting, which scenario you're playing on. Some of those can be ridiculously difficult. And a lot of the abilities that the foes have, in particular the level 4 foes, they can be devastating. When you have the Titan in there and he starts destroying buildings, you really have to be careful because you can lose the game really quickly by gaining corruption. And if any one player, if they gain their 3rd corruption card, the game ends, we lose. Whenever you lose a building, you gain a corruption. It can go really quickly. Once certain foes get out, you have to try to fight those foes back and keep them under control. You're right, Nathan. The game we played was fairly easy in comparison to some of the other games we played. But I love that, the fact it plays so differently. Pretty much every game I've played has played completely different. That's based on the cards that you pick at the beginning of the game and also the heroes that you choose. There are asymmetrical powers that you start with, fairly small scale differences at the beginning of the game, but as you unlock more virtues and gain treasures, those abilities become far more broad, far more distinct from each other as you get into the game. And there's a lot of the treasures, I think, that have a lot of cohesion with the abilities of certain heroes. If one hero gets a certain treasure card, it can be completely game-changing for the group.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I experienced with the game that I play. I was playing the Thieves Guild. Thieves Guild allows you to get this hippo ally that allows you to carry 4 additional treasures. Then one of the abilities of the Thieves Guild also allows me to go through the treasure deck, pick out an item. I was able to retrieve the crystal blade, I think is what it was, that allows me to add 1 wild advantage for every other treasure card that I have. All of a sudden, my sword gave me 7 advantages. We'll get to talking what advantages do for you in a little bit here. Those advantages will make the enemies easier to fight. That was huge. Because you alluded to earlier that each of these monsters has 2 traits that if you have advantages in those traits, you can reduce the damage that they can cause or the threat that they invoke. Having those 7 wild advantages means that, they're wild. So you could use them for any attribute. It almost felt a little broken, a little too good.
Yeah, totally.
It was awesome, though.
It was awesome.
I just have to say, several months ago, talked a little bit about this game, how we were looking forward to it when it was both jumped on the Kickstarter, really looking forward to getting it. This game, I never played it as a child. Anytime we went to my cousin's house down in West Valley, they would pull it out, all the older cousins. And I was just like the first cousin that was always like, nope, sorry, you can't play. And I always wanted to play. I always had this yearning to play this game, to the point where when we were going to go visit these people, that was one of the first things. I was like, can we play Dark Tower? And then it would always, yeah, we'll probably play it later. Everybody else wanted to play, and so I didn't get to. When this was announced, I cannot wait to play this game. This is probably my most anticipated game, maybe ever. Just had to share that one.
Thanks for sharing, Dave. Nathan, you mentioned the Thieves Guild. So that's actually part of the Alliance expansion, the Thieves Guild. As part of that expansion, each player is going to have a different guild that they are a member of, or that corresponds to that region of the map. So the map is separated into 4 different regions, north, south, east, west. Each of those regions will have a guild that is associated with it. And I love this feature of the expansion, is the fact that you actually have negative effects from your guild at the beginning of the game.
Because you're just a lowly member of the
Correct.
guild.
And you have to level up your guild in order to get those better abilities. There are 4 different levels. Each time you level up, you unlock a new ally that you are going to gain throughout the game. And it also will either decrease the negativity of what your guild is giving you, or eventually will become a benefit for you later in the game. Makes it a little bit more of a grind and a little bit more difficult at the beginning of the game. But if you can manage to level up your guild, especially if you can get everybody's guilds up to level 3 and 4 by the end of the game, that can be huge when you get to where you're fighting the main adversary. Abilities on that are crazy amazing. Not only that, there's an A side and a B side for those guilds. So the B side's actually a little more difficult. So the penalties are a little bit more damaging and more hurtful to you at the beginning of the game. But on the flip side, the benefits once you get it leveled up to level 3 and 4 are way better than the A side.
Yeah, it feels like a massive power shift as you're playing with those guilds in the game. It's a lot harder right at the beginning, but like you said, as you unlock their levels, they give you a lot of boosts. And not to mention, every time somebody goes up a level on their guild, you're unlocking an ally that gets added to the game. You go into the app, tell it that you've added that ally. App will choose when the allies sort of trigger events, and they can give you huge boosts in the game on top of ongoing effects. It feels like this really cool system where the more sort of resources you pump into building up your guilds and making them more powerful, the more you get in return. After playing the base game several times, my opinion of it was that it was really, really difficult. I thought this was an incredibly hard game to beat. My win record was only at about 50%. Once we added the guilds, I felt like it got a lot harder at first. I need to play with it a little bit more because it sort of feels like once you round the corner on those guilds, once you can get a few of them up to like level 2 and 3, you almost become overpowered and the game loses some of its challenge. So I do have some minor concerns with the balance of that Alliances expansion, but I don't know that I'd ever want to play without it. The treasure cards it adds, those allies that it adds, the things it lets you do, they're just too fun to ignore.
I've only played it twice. The first time was without the expansion, and I enjoyed it. But the second time, Andy, you've talked about games every once in a while that the expansion makes the game. I feel that way about this. It just, what it adds, what it does for the gameplay is really, really huge. But that'll be interesting to see if what you're saying is something that we experience over and over again, because that is something I think that we all agree on, right? That it's nice to have a challenge. For me, having that expansion in there just makes the gameplay so much more enjoyable.
And you can go and update the difficulty. The app allows you to increase that, go from easier to normal to, I want to say, heroic, and then it's like insane or something like that. I can't remember. Those aren't the terms, but... Gritty, yes. Gritty, which is, it sounds gritty, I think, very tough. Kind of talked about our feelings of this, so maybe we should describe the game a little bit.
Everybody's going to play a unique hero. The first thing you want to look at when you're choosing a hero is your banner ability. That's going to be your asymmetrical power to start the game, along with a virtue that will be unique to your character and a virtue that will be unique to your region. Those are going to be unique abilities. Typically, it's going to be something that will give you advantage of some sort. The regional abilities will give you a wild advantage when you're in a specific terrain type. Banner abilities trigger at the beginning of your turn. You will do your banner ability, and then you get to choose what you want to do next on your turn. So there are 3 things you can do. You can move, you can do your heroic action, and you can do a reinforce action. Your movement can be broken up in between your actions as well. Most heroes have a movement of 3. When you want to do your reinforce action, you need to do that in one of the 4 buildings in a region. Every region will have a sanctuary, a citadel, a village, and a bazaar. Depending on which building you are doing your reinforce action will determine what benefit you're going to get. For example, if I want to gain a treasure card or an item card, I need to go to the bazaar. If I want to unlock one of my virtues, which is kind of like leveling up your character, I need to do that at the citadel, or I can gain a potion. Now, each of those actions are going to have a free action that I can just do without any cost, or I can have an upgraded action that will have some sort of cost to it. Now, I have to pick one or the other. I don't get to do both. If I want the upgraded action, I pay the cost, I get to do it, and I can continue my turn moving, or if I so choose, if there's something else I can do there, I can do my heroic action at that same location.
For example, like what you're talking about here is, go back to the example that you used at the Citadel. Free action at the Citadel is to gain a potion. Or you can spend 5 spirit to unlock one of your virtues.
Correct.
Level up.
That's correct. There's the Sanctuary also, and then free action at the Sanctuary is you just gain a free spirit. The upgraded action at the Sanctuary is you can spend 5 spirit to remove a corruption from your player board. All of your corruption, not a corruption. You remove all corruption cards from your player board. Finally, there is the Village. The Village is where you're going to get soldiers. You get 6 soldiers for free, or you can do the upgraded action and get 12 soldiers. You can spend 1 spirit to get an additional 6 soldiers for a total of 12 for your upgraded action. Now, your reinforced action is when you take it, and which one you take can be huge, depending on what you want to do on your turn. The order you take your heroic action and your movement and your reinforced action is all dependent on how you want to perform on your turn. So let's discuss the heroic actions.
To the point you're making right here about deciding when you want to do different things, one of the big reasons for that is after your heroic action, you gain 2 spirit, and spirit is the cost for a lot of things.
A lot of stuff.
So sometimes you need to do that heroic action before you can afford to do your reinforce action.
Not only that, some of your heroic actions, for example, one of your heroic actions is you can attack. When you attack something, you're going to go into the app, and you're going to pick whatever foe you're going to be fighting, and they're going to have battle cards that come up. Now, depending on the level of the foe, it's level 2, 3, 4, or in the case of the adversary, you'll pick 5 cards from him. If I'm picking the base level 2, the weakest of the foes, a bunch of cards will come up. I'm going to pick 2 of the cards that are shown on the screen, and those cards will flip over, and they're attack cards, so it's going to have a negative effect on me. At this point, I can now spend advantage. I can look at what advantages that this foe is vulnerable to, and I will look and see how many of those advantages I have on my player board between treasures, between items, and any virtues that I may have. And I also can count any wild advantage like Nathan was talking about. I can have a max of 10. Now I can spend those advantages to lower the effectiveness of each of those battle cards. And sometimes you even can turn a battle card that has a negative effect into something that will have a bonus or a positive effect on you. It may give you a potion. It may give you a virtue. It may actually give you soldiers instead of losing soldiers. But when you do go into a fight, if you're not going to have enough advantage to turn that into a positive, or if you're fighting one of the more difficult foes, you want to make sure you go in with enough soldiers and also with enough spirit. Many times that is going to cost you. Sometimes it'll cost you an item, sometimes it'll cost you a potion, but most of the time it's going to be spirit or soldiers. If I'm going into a battle and I don't have any soldiers, I probably want to stop at the village first, do my reinforce there, pick up some soldiers, then I can do my heroic action and go in and attack.
The downside to not having enough, if you have to lose any more spirit or soldiers than you can afford to lose, that's when you start gaining corruption.
Yes, and corruption will have an ongoing negative effect until you remove it. Like we talked about before, if you ever gain your 3rd, we all lose and the game ends. What other heroic actions do we have?
One of the other things you can do when you take your heroic action is to quest. This is one of my personal favorites. Sometimes when you complete a quest, you just need to go to the spot and the app will just tell you, okay, you need to turn in these resources or have a certain condition met. You just press the button, hold it down, and you're done. More times than not, when you quest, you get to delve into these dungeons. I love the way the app handles dungeons. It is so fun. It actually has a random map that generates. It feels almost like a D&D dungeon type map. And you select what path you want to take through. And sometimes if you pick wisely, you can get through that dungeon in such a way that you don't have to spend very many of your advantages to find the objective or to get to the exit or whatever it is it's having you do. A lot of times really meander all the way through that map just trying to find your objective. Right. And it's frustrating as you're going through. I say frustrating, but frustrating in a fun way, because as you're going through, you're spending all these advantages you've saved up to go do this dungeon, and you keep spending them because you don't want to pay the costs. And sometimes you find good stuff and you're going through. The further and further you get, those advantages are running out and you're taking more and more cost, and you're like, where's the objective? Where is it? And then when you finally find it, it feels really, really good. It's that heroic feeling kind of moment when you complete one of the dungeons in the game. I really, really like questing.
I enjoy the questing as well. And they also have some great benefit to completing them. Some of them are really good.
The second game I played, I didn't enter any dungeons at all. That was something that I missed. The first time I played one of the first turns, I did go into a dungeon, and I thought the dungeons were, I thought they were an exceptional part of the game, probably one of my favorite parts of the game. Exploring, I found that more entertaining than I did just simply fighting the monsters. I guess I'm just a sucker for discovery and press your luck in that kind of way, but I thought the dungeons were a superb part of the game.
One of the fun things about it is there's a high probability as you spend your advantages in those rooms that you will find loot. You know, when you're battling and you upgrade the monster cards, sometimes it'll turn it into advantage. Maybe you'll gain some warriors or some spirit or something like that. But when you are in those dungeons, it will start giving you items. In fact, delving dungeons is a great way to get some of the items that are out and available for players. feels like that discovery you're talking about, Nathan. It feels like you're delving a dungeon. It feels good.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It gives you that delving feeling. I already said I liked it, so I still like it. Nothing's changed in the last 10 seconds.
On top of all that, some of them are ally quests. So you go do this quest and gain an ally.
Yeah, and you guys mentioned as far as questing, I think the dungeons are the funnest type of quest that you can go on. But there are other quests that you're going to be doing in the game. Even though it may not be a dungeon, you want to make sure you do. If you don't complete certain quests, it actually can have a very negative benefit on the players at the end of the month. Some of those may just be go to this location, discard 2 equipment cards, and you've completed that quest. Spend 4 beast advantages at this location. Kind of a boring quest as far as excitement level, but very necessary so that you can either get an ally or to avoid some sort of negative effect that will happen at the end of the month.
Boring or not, almost always worth it.
For sure, yes.
So can we pause for just a second? Thank you. Now I want to talk about the board, the tower, visual aspect of this game.
So do we want to come back to that? Because there's one more heroic action that we need to talk about. We need to talk
Absolutely.
we need to talk about cleanse.
The final heroic ability is the cleanse ability, and you do this at any building. Allows you to remove the skulls that are on that building, return them to the bag. So one of the ways to lose the game is if there's no skulls in the bag to feed to the tower. So you want to be able to cleanse those as often as you can, or at least as often as is needed. There's always skulls in the bag, because as you dump skulls in the tower, as the tower rotates, which we haven't really talked about yet, some of those skulls get stuck in the tower. You don't want to run out of those skulls, so you need to be cleansing, and you can cleanse at any building. It doesn't have to be the building in your region. All the skulls in the base game are the white skulls, but in the Alliances expansion, there's 4 different power skulls that have different abilities.
Yeah, those skulls can be detrimental. I know that my least favorite are the green ones. They make you discard an item whenever you enter a base that has a green skull on that location. If you can ever get abilities to cleanse without having to be present in that region, that's huge. The power skulls have no real effect on you unless you enter the space where there is a power skull. The red ones are going to make you discard warriors. Purples will make you discard influence, which is what you need to level up your guilds. Blue ones will make you discard your spirit, and then the green ones are the blight ones. They're the worst, in my opinion.
You work hard to get those items. You don't want to lose them.
Cleansing is also super important. One of the reasons it didn't get mentioned why it's important is if a building ever would take its 4th skull, that building is destroyed, and those skulls are actually removed from the game. Don't go back in the bag. That's fewer skulls we have in the bag, because you only have 24 skulls in the bag to begin the game with.
And when you lose that building, you gain a corruption.
You do indeed, which, once again, if it's your 3rd, forfeit the game and lose.
Can we talk about the tower now? And not just the tower. I mean, the board. I find the whole board interesting and good. It's a round board that sits under the tower. The tower sits in the middle, and then there's the 4 regions that Andy talked about earlier. There's north, east, south, and west. Each of those regions gives virtue to the player that sits at that home region. One of the ways of changing the game experience is not sitting at the same region every time, mixing that up. That way you can have different mix of abilities. Each of those regions is divided by a river. There are a bunch of different terrain types. There's mountains, there's hills, plains, lakes, there are forests. And last but not least, there are deserts. This map it's nice looking, and then in the middle of it is that awesome tower. Nathan mentioned the tower spinning, or not spinning, but rotating. At the end of every player's turn, they're going to drop a skull into the top of the tower, and you don't know what's going to happen with it. It could spit it out right then into one of the 4 regions, or it could hold on to it for who knows how long, sit somewhere in the tower until it decides that it's going to rotate a certain way that will send it flying. At the end of every month, generally, everybody's going to get at least 2 turns. At that point, it's going to randomly determine how long the month's going to be. It's just going to tell you at the end of somebody's turn, the month is ending. Those quests that you talked about before, you got to get on those because you don't know when the month is going to end and you're going to lose that quest. At the end of the turn, you drop that skull, and it could have an event where the tower is having convulsions.
The tower stirs.
The app will tell you a glyph is glowing, and you just have to look around because there are lights on the tower. If it's in front of you, you're going to see 2 little lights on the side of the glyph glowing, blinking at you. You take a face shield off of the spot that it's glowing at, have a glyph underneath there that shows you one of the heroic actions.
So there are glyphs on the tower that correspond to every action you can take on your player board. And if one of those glyphs is facing you, that means that if you want to take that action, you've got to pay a spirit first, pay homage to the tower before you can proceed to take that action.
And when removing these face shields, sometimes there's nothing there. And that's where these skulls, when it decides, are going to fall out through this emptiness. Last time we played, Nathan got 7 skulls. 1 drop, 7 skulls, boom. Luckily, he didn't already have a bunch of skulls on his buildings, because you only have 4 buildings. Max they can have is 3.
And sometimes when you take that off of the tower, there are already skulls inside of the tower behind that door, and those skulls immediately drop into your region. Especially once those start coming off, progress into the game, it's really important to keep buildings at least somewhat cleansed so you have space to be placing those skulls if they start coming out into your region.
I just want to add, I love this tower. This feels like such a cool feat of engineering to me. It's got all those little lights that light up. It's got those little shields that you can pop off that'll reveal glyphs or more spaces where the skulls can fall out of. It also has incredible sound effects. They've done such a good job at sort of integrating this old school 16-bit sound into that tower. And they made that choice deliberately, not because it was cheap speakers or something like that. They were really wanting to go with that sort of nostalgic vibe. They wanted to take you back to that old school original Dark Tower game. Even if you haven't played it, how many of us had some of those old console games growing up? It just takes you right back to that 16-bit sound. It's just fun.
Not only that, that tower has great table presence. You get that game set up. Anybody who walks by who doesn't know what you're doing, they're like, what in the world are you guys playing?
Turns heads for sure.
It really does. Speaking of components, tower is amazing. Doug, you have the Kickstarter version of this with all the upgraded components, and I think the upgraded components are great. Between the miniatures for the foes, they're awesome. Towers to show the different quest icon towers, those are great. All your hero miniatures. Even the chips for your spirit and the chips for your warriors are really nice. Now, the retail version of the game doesn't have all of that.
It's all cardboard.
It's high quality still, but nothing really to write home about it compared to the Kickstarter upgraded components. If you're wanting to get into this game, which I would highly recommend, if you can get the Kickstarter version, I would. Even if you can't, still worth it. You may not have quite the table presence without all the upgraded components, but you still have the tower, and the gameplay's amazing.
It's that Dark Horde expansion is what it's called. And if you have this game and you can get your hands on that somehow, I think it's worth it. These minis in that Dark Horde expansion that replace the cardboard, they're not just your bland gray plastic mini. These really, really high quality, high fidelity, kind of have like a black stone washed aesthetic to them. Just look fantastic. When you pull those dragons out and plop it down in a territory and it's almost taking up the entire space, it really, really adds to the table presence. I think the thematic nature of the game.
The Titan also, because it's just this huge miniature. It looks scary on the board. You really feel like, my gosh, we have got to get that guy out of there. He's going to start stepping on buildings. Just having that miniature gives you that more of a sense of urgency, for me anyway, than a piece of cardboard would. It seems far more intimidating having those very high detailed miniatures on the board rather than a flat piece of cardboard. I think they did a really good job with the miniature expansion. That's one that I think is a must-have. So one more thing to note on this is there is an upcoming expansion, Covenant expansion, had kickstarted. It's going to add more heroes to it, going to add some different gameplay to it. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping they add to the app. I'm hoping they add more foes. I'm hoping they add more content to the app itself. I think it'd be really easy for them to do. I really hope that they do. I think that's going to really increase the replayability, especially for those that already had and played the game. I think about this game and how many games do I own that I've played 7 times, especially in a short period of time that I've played this 7 times. And it's a 2-hour game, 2-hour plus for us. It usually takes us about 3. I know it says that it's up to 2 hours. Usually takes us a little longer. Thoroughly enjoyed it every time.
And it doesn't seem like it takes that long.
It doesn't.
You're not sitting here going, oh, this has been 3 hours. Like every other game you play with me.
Yes. Looking over at Merchants of the Dark Road thinking, yes, that was a painful game. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dave. The length of this game, it didn't bother me at all. I felt involved. I felt intrigued and entertained the whole time. So I don't remember going to my phone because I was bored with this game, which is always a great indicator for me.
Well, there seems to be a lot of collaboration between the players, too. You got to have to make plans. Okay, if I do this, do you want to do this? And you really do. You have to work together to beat the game. It's not just a one-man show or I'm going to do this, you guys do whatever you want. You really have to collaborate and work together.
comes from the designers. Like you have Rob Daviau, who did the Pandemic games, and
Isaac Childres is Gloomhaven.
the other designers worked on Betrayal Legacy. There's thought into the development of the game and the storytelling of the game, which it shines. It makes the game outstanding, in my opinion, and puts it almost on that same shelf as Gloomhaven. Doesn't quite have that continued longevity that I think Gloomhaven has, but it definitely has a lot of replayability.
So final thoughts.
I absolutely love Return to Dark Tower. Every time we get this one out, I have a great time playing it. There's incredible asymmetry in the characters and the game setup. There's a wide range of customizable difficulties. The tower is absolutely fantastic. The story doesn't bog down. It's got just enough in there to make you feel like you're having an epic experience without overwhelming anyone. Characters are all unique and fun, great app integration, and I think it does a good job at making players feel clever as they work together to defeat the Dark Tower. This is just a really, really great game. Kind of a home run in my opinion.
You have the asymmetric powers of the players. They do need to work together, and I think the app integration is great. Andy, you mentioned being able to upgrade that. So there's a lot of content that is just exclusively on the app. The battle card, the minion, the big bad are all in that app. Additional content can easily be added to that. Just like you, I'm hoping with the Covenant expansion, there's going to be a boost in that content that's in there, as well as a boost in the treasures and heroes, and provide some more of that diversity in options and replayability. Even with having only played it once, I'm very much excited to play this game again.
It's going to sound kind of like I'm picking on the game, but I'm not. I love it. I want to play it. But our last playthrough, Nathan, you mentioned you weren't on your phone. I went to my phone because I felt completely inconsequential the last half of that game.
Yeah, you had some big stuff that you wanted to do, but then I was doing big stuff right in front of you.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that if we play it a little more difficult the next time, that'll change that. That said, I still enjoy the game. Super excited to play it again.
I've played this with 4 players. I've played it with 2 players, and I've played it solo. It plays very differently in all of those aspects because you still have to manage all 4 regions. Player count doesn't change anything. You still have to manage the entire board. There's a whole different level of difficulty in board management depending on player count, which I love because it changes it up completely. The 2-player game, we got skunked, I think, in the 2nd month or the 3rd month. We got destroyed. It was really tough. Solo game I played, I was the warlord because I didn't want to have to worry about soldiers so much, and I played with the expansion. I was the Thieves Guild like you were, Nathan. That was my guild, but you can unlock the other guilds too. I got so stinking powerful, it was ridiculous. I got the same sword, the same broken ability. It may be overpowered because it was a breeze, but it played very differently. I think the replayability of this is so high. So many different factors, player count, different characters, the different foes that are available to play. All of it changes the game so drastically, and it makes it feel so different. I love it. It is one of my favorite games right now. I've played it 7 times, and I would play it right now if I had a chance to. I can't say anything better about it. It's great.
That is Return to Dark Tower. And on that note, Andy says we're done, and we're going to bust it out again. We're going to play it right now.
Until next time.
We'll see you dropping your skulls into the Dark Tower, hoping to survive.
Dun, dun, dun.
Are you dropping it like it's hot?
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braiding Detergent for our music.
Meeple Nation.
First try.
Oh, I was going with it.
We should have just done a whole big thing, and then I would have got you guys going, and then I would have started in with the little jingle about Meeple Nation podcast being sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com.
Just gonna run with it from there now.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
This game, I never played it as a child. Anytime we went to my cousin's house down in West Valley, they would pull it out, all the older cousins. And I was just like the first cousin that was always like, oh, sorry, you can't play. And I always wanted to play. Never
Always
could.
been that cousin, Dave.
Yeah, I have been. I always will be. I know. I know. Laugh it up.
Laugh it up, fuzzball. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It gives you that doving?
Doving?
Gives you that doving feeling. That
You've lost that doving feeling.
But yes, it gives you that delving feeling.
There are already skulls sitting beside it, inside of the tower behind that door.